Hi everyone, we here at Samvaad are in the process of conducting interviews on Pride Month and uh, interviewing queer individuals on their experiences around Pride and otherwise as well. Here we have Ray. Ray, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Ray. My pronouns are they, them. I identify as non-binary and I have for the past 3 years now. Yeah? Okay. I don't know what else to do.
What is your Ray? So let's start off. Can you tell us a little bit about how your journey has been as a queer individual in India? Do you think that Pride Month and initiative by queer organizations have played a role in your life or journey?
Right. So as I mentioned, I went around questioning my gender identity about 3 years ago. And this was also my identity as a queer individual has been very sheltered and very safe because I've always been surrounded by those who have been queer in a safe space where I wasn't um, questioned or berated for my gender identity, right? So because of my very privileged space, I have not gone through a lot of turmoil due to my gender identity, and the only turmoils I've gone through are personal, mental, and things like that, but nothing specific of the sort. In terms of Pride Month and queer organizations, I have been a part of queer organizations, and getting in touch with those who identify as queer has been helpful to me in the sense that I get to understand and speak to various people and recognize um, the spectrum where their identities lie and get to know them as well. But in terms of playing an actual like or truly affecting my life in the sense, no, because I'm not in a space where I need.
Can you elaborate on your thoughts on the role of how intersectionality plays a role in queer politics, especially with the case of India?
Especially in the case of India. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, I think intersectionality is a very important concept toward various social ideas and concepts in terms of work, like feminism, this, this, queer politics as well. Recognizing that everything is a spectrum and that you can never truly classify an individual or classes is, I guess, a very vague definition of what intersectionality is, but it's something that we have to recognize because the way that we've been living for all these years, where let it be like, male, female, or this, that, like just binaries is kind of is convenient in a very like administrative outlook. But in terms of recognizing the fact that we are all human beings and we're all complicated individuals that have evolved over the course of like a century and decades and stuff. The idea of intersectionality is important because we're not part of a form. We're all different.
The sociology is so showing
Hey yo.
how actively do you participate in queer activities that happen during Pride Month? Do you think there is a shortage of events or activities to support the queer community during this time?
See, Pride Month is a period of time that queer people have designated to celebrate us as a community and to bring more awareness to the fact that we exist. Um, but I personally don't participate a lot in Pride Month. Uh, I don't participate a lot in Pride Month in comparison to other months. I try to advocate for the Pride community equally throughout all the months because the way I see it, June is just another month. Like Pride Month is just there for representation. You don't like over exaggerate the existence of a community just for the sake of a month existing. Um, Obviously, rainbow capitalism exists. Capitalism is everywhere. We're all stuck. But, um, I don't know. Pride Month is overused by those who don't identify as queer for the sake of fake inclusivity, for their joy, I guess.
You mentioned rainbow capitalism, and that brings me to my next question. Do you think using the visibility commercial organizations and corporates who rainbow themselves in this month, do you think this kind of visibility is helpful for the whole community, or is it more harmful than helpful?
Not at all. Not the way it's functioning right now. So while I know what the concept is, I don't know how it originated. So the way that I like to think of it is those who created it had the intention to truly, like, showcase what the queer community is, but due to the capitalistic notion of the entire concept, it's just like bringing around ideas across the majority heterosexual and cis population that, you know, we're to be idolized for a certain period and then to just be thrown away another period. It is not helpful. It is just there for the sake of capitalism, and that is not helpful to anyone.
Do you think during Pride Month, this might be coming from a personal experience point of view, but do you think during Pride Month a certain kind of queerness is prioritized? And by that I mean, say, ideas of love is love instead of focusing on the TGNC community, or something like focusing on the idea of marriage, or something that's very heteronormative in its mold, something that's more
Yeah,
easily
absolutely
acceptable.
right. Yeah, that's also because of, rainbow capitalism, right? Like a sort of whitewashing the queer community that is already being whitewashed into non-existence. So even within the queer community, there are accepted queer identities. Like the whole concept of trans erasure and bi erasure, for that matter, is like so prevalent within our communities, and it's very difficult for um, people who are bisexual, trans people, asexual people, aromantic people, people who's like these groups of people who aren't even recognized by those in the queer community themselves. Pride Month may be like like opening a small like hole in this dark window for their existence to be seen, but that's it.
According to you, what role do queer organizations play in the lives of queer individuals? And like, have you joined any such organizations or started some or been connected to any of these organizations at any time in your life?
See, it depends on the organization. See, right now I'm part of this organization called Recover Media, which is the board members are almost 90% queer and neurodivergent, and our entire team is filled with various, a large spectrum of queer people, neurodivergent people who, and we just like to talk about like just various issues that are happening. And so, as people who are queer and leading and bringing our voice to certain issues, we are able to create a space for other queer individuals because we know what we needed as when we were younger for us to, you know, I won't say thrive is the word, but to live a little bit more than we actually are. Because when you're queer, your entire like physical area, especially when you're young, even though we're very privileged, that kind of mental space is like very stigmatized, and you're not able to find that safe space with a physical area. So in the kind of organization that I am in, at least, we are able to do our best to have or create some sort of community for us where we're able to understand each other. Now, I've heard of a lot of other communities that were queer that were just like whitewashing everything and very toxic to other queer individuals with just putting the name and face of, oh my God, we're inclusive. So I would say that it really depends on the people. So just because we're queer doesn't mean that, all queer people are so understanding and empathetic and inclusive or whatever. Like it's an identity. It's who you are, and that doesn't define your personality, you know.
Not something that should be put in a pedestal, or like some kind of angelic form. It's just people. It's just people who are
Yeah,
different in some
exactly.
ways, but similar to you than you, more similar to you than you realize.
Exactly. It reminds me of this Miley Cyrus quote. I keep seeing this on Pinterest constantly, where she had an interview where she said that not everyone is good because they went to church, and not everyone is bad because they don't go to church. Even though
Exactly.
this is like a religious thing, it still, you know,
Relevant.
holds true for this as well. Yeah.
No, I agree. Can you expand more on your work with Recover?
So I joined Recover, I think, 2 years ago. So I was just a writer initially, and so we write about various, or we promote various ideas. We talk about queerness, we explain queer identities, we talk about queer issues, we speak about happening things like the Ayushman Khurana magazine, where he spoke about gender. We don't talk about that, we don't consider that, but we spoke about it. The Riya Chakravarti thing, things like that. We speak about mental health issues, neurodivergency, defining terms, because neurodivergency as a concept is not something that's understood very well, and it's mental health again as a concept is very stigmatized and no one likes it, but it's something that's very real and has to be recognized. So it's something that because we're all affected by, we like to speak about as well. So that is something that I've been helping with, and we held an event last year, which was a fundraiser for binders. So we had various artists come and perform, and we were able to fund a whole lot of money, and we got various binders for uh, trans people who needed them. I was one of them because we got binders for I think 20 people. I think.
That sounds amazing. That sounds amazing. As a person who's looked into founders and like always been balked at the rate, I think that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was. It's amazing being part of Recover. We're we're very cool people, but we're also kids, So we're just trying to talk about what we're seeing, and we function mainly through social media, which again, a very complicated space. But being in and around so many kinds of queer people and trying to be a space where we can be accessed by everybody is very important to us because we are aware of our privilege, right? We all have money, we've all gone to very high funda schools, and we all speak English, but there aren't like those in the queer community. We're like part of like the top 1%. There are so many other people who go through similar issues that we do, but aren't in say a socio-economic space to or deal with it like how we want to bring things up like that so that we can all be aware of it and try to help each other the best.
No, I think that sounds amazing. And just because you're kids doesn't mean you're not capable of bringing about amazing change as like you are. Uh, what obstacles do you think an individual from the queer community would have to face? Do you think queer organizations like the one you're part of can help eradicate these or at least aid queer individuals to a certain level? And how do you think that can happen?
Hmm. There are, I'm sure there are a lot of issues that queer individuals have to face, but it also depends, right, on the spectrum you are in the community. If you can pass as, cis heterosexual, then it's convenient. You won't have to face as many obstacles. And depending on where you are in the social economic spectrum, it gets easier the higher up you go. But if you are, say, trans or gender non-conforming, because of the fact that you don't fit into normative ideals that need to be perpetuated, which is very important in the business world as it is in any other place, it gets very confusing for the individual to be able to find a and queer organizations don't have enough power yet. So we're still stuck in a normative, binary filled powers, capitalistic yuck yuck society. And in order for queer individuals to truly thrive, there has to be a lot of the power dynamics have to shift, like the organization I'm in, Recover. we're so small. We're just a group of like what, 60 people who are functioning on working through an Instagram account which has 4,000 followers at max. And 4,000 is a lot of people, but it's not a lot of substantial people enough to make the kind of changes that we want to for the community that we're in, right? So I think when queer organizations get more power and enough power to allow individuals who are on the queer spectrum to do their jobs while not being, berated for who they are, then I guess the obstacles can be reduced. But then again, I've been very sheltered. My journey as a queer individual has been very smooth sailing. All my issues have just been personal relationships. Like I've never missed out on an opportunity due to my identity, at least not yet. So I wouldn't.
To delve in a more different territory of certainly of opinions rather than experience. What are your thoughts on the corporate world and queer experiences within the corporate world? And how do you think queer experiences within the corporate world can be improved, not just like in terms of employment, but also creation of commodities that queer people need?
I honestly don't know. Like I I don't know much about how the corporate world deals. What I know is that there's a diversity quota which that is ended up filled by 1 out of 5,000 queer people that like apply for the position, and that also is in like very extremely liberal and those who are from very high social and economic spaces creating such job opportunities and like are aware of the queer identities and aware that it does not affect work performance, but that's not something that I'm aware of.
Sorry, the next question is on marital rights uh, and same-sex marriage, because that has been the current uh, that is not just a current debate, but also one of the debates that shot to popularity after Section 377. Could you elaborate on your thoughts around that?
This is very personal, but I don't like marriage as a concept, and this is also a lot of the queerness in me saying this, but um it's a very conservative idea of choosing or like legally saying that I will stay with a singular person for the rest of my life regardless of any things that we go through. And if you choose not to, because I mean it doesn't make sense. You're not the same person for more than 2 years. You keep changing after you meet people, after you go to new places and do things. So how can you expect to want to be with that same person for your entire life and bind it with a legal document? Like, I think it's dumb. But I think that for those who want to get married, they should get married. Like, if you want to bind yourself to a person and be monogamous and and choose to give all of your savings away to that one person, then go for it. But in terms of the whole marital rights thing, everything's going uh down the drain in India. Kind of terrifying with the kind of like the gap from what I've heard and experienced versus what I see on the news. Like, you know, like I don't know, like child marriage and marital rape and the whole giving all of the woman having to give all of her rights to her husband and the husband having uh can do anything and the wife just has to sit there and sit still and look pretty and all. Like a part of why I don't like marriage as a concept is because of like the patriarchal like ideas that revolve around it, with the whole idea of power being given across, and there's nothing about equality or equity for that matter, because it's not a partnership, it's not a relationship, it's just a that's it, which
A
is very
legal deed.
morbid to say, but
You
yeah,
know,
that.
it's valid to say. Like, I mean, it's like it is a very stringent sentence. It's even if you look at it from the angle of love, there's a lot of control that goes into marriage, and that again might be our opinion as queer people,
But also, marriage is not like a relationship between the two people in the marriage. It's like the families of both the people combined into the marriage. And
it's like a
like,
social regulation. You require it
yeah,
for certain freedoms and certain
it's
rights.
like a cult precision with the
Yeah.
entire, with
No, I,
yeah, I
I
love
get it.
going to weddings because free food, but like the whole idea
Mhm.
of weddings, right? Wedding food is the best.
And
But
booze.
yeah, but it's very scary. It's not
No, of course. Being a part of the TGNC community, what are your thoughts on the evolution of transgender rights post Section 377, especially with respect to the Trans Bill 2019, Trans Act now, actually, sorry. I can log you holding your hands up to your face as a response as well. That's valid.
the trans rights bill is not a trans, it's not a for trans rights bill. It's a you exist, I don't care about you, go die. That's what that bill says. That bill, I don't know why it even came up into, or why it was even passed if it wasn't going to help anybody. It just ugh,
No
makes
way.
me
It
so
helps the state
upset
censor you and it helps the state label you and control you. Hence the purpose.
of that. It's very upsetting for me to see as like an Indian citizen. See, I've never been patriotic, nor have I understood the idea of loving the nation. But as someone who's an Indian citizen and watched our country do things like this and completely discriminate and oppress an entire community of people like this, it hurts and it sucks and it makes me want to leave even quicker than I am going to leave. And I don't want to like have to leave, Like I want to stay here. I want to be able to be free and be who I am without having the state to want to censor me because I am not part of the binary that they believe is right. And it's worse because India, we were an incredible country before bloody British people came to colonize us, which is why we're going to shit now. Like before before colonization we were beautiful, there were no boundaries, everything was, we were doing good to the planet. We were there was gender was a non-concept, sexuality was a non-concept. Have you read the Mahabharata? Literally, Krishna, everybody, he was everybody and he
Purest
screwed everything.
character I've ever read about.
Absolutely. My god, like
I could talk about it for eons, like how freaking queer Krishna is. Ram hate him, but Krishna love him. My God, that
right.
man, that person was as queer as it gets. In love with everybody, everyone loved him. Amazing, amazing.
Yes, he was the best. Yeah, I genuinely had an obsession with peacock feathers for the longest time because of Krishna. Not even going to lie.
Okay, him and Hanuman.
Yes, best
I
buddies.
I had the biggest obsession with Hanuman when I was a kid. Like because that kiddish movie, but like now I realize like I mean you can't fault the guy for having a bad crush, but it was still like such an such a ace icon, such a ace icon.
Was the best, truly.
Yeah, but if a Sangi hears us say this, they will probably behead us. So
Please, I don't want to be beheaded. I'm good.
yeah, no, I get it. Uh, uh couple of more questions left. So, do you think queerness has ever been a barrier of access to you in specific? Um, if you have any experiences that you've heard of or something that you faced, if you're comfortable with describing them, we would completely understand if you're not.
See, as I've mentioned in the answers to my previous questions, I have not faced many barriers due to my queer identity. because of the very privileged space that I've been in, even when I was coming out or like processing my gender identity, a lot of the people I was really close with in school identified as queer and had identified as queer for a while. So I was able to speak to them without, like, the fear of someone not understanding me, and be able to come out in a very safe space where I know a lot of people who weren't able to get that, and that's like the bare minimum. In terms of barriers, I've only heard about things like a couple of friends of mine lost job opportunities because they were queer, and uh, some were, what's the like were shot profanities across the street because they were holding hands, something like that, and things like that. Stories that I've heard, but nothing personal for me.
This is the last question. What kind of legal protections do you think the Indian state should come to provide queer individuals going forward, or just to start with, not going forward, just to start with? And at the moment, what do you think is lacking? Like, what is lacking in sort of an emergency crisis kind of thing?
Everything is lacking. Like, getting rid of Section 377 was a giant step for us as a country, and I acknowledge that. But just because we've gotten rid of 377 doesn't mean that discrimination has stopped, right? Like, there are so many stories that I've heard that terrify me as a queer individual, even though I'm aware that because of my privileged space and because of the name that my parents own, I won't have to experience that, at least to my knowledge. But still, like, people deserve basic rights. People deserve to be able to present the way they want to. Like, trans people deserve to be able to see themselves in the mirror and not want to, and be able to see themselves. They deserve to have reassignment surgeries if they want to. They deserve to be able to go through the name change process and see their name there in a much more easier way without having to prove that they are trans, which is part of the trans. It's ridiculous. They, you can't stop discrimination by passing a law or getting rid of it. It's a large social change, which is something that the queer community understands, but just giving us bills and making us children look pretty is absolute, excuse my French, bullshit.
Thank you for the riveting interaction. And thanks a lot for this. I'm gonna